South African teams in the Champions Cup, folks, has been a little bit of a contentious issue in the past since they've joined this competition following their addition to the URC. Some people don't like it. They don't like the extra travel. They don't like the attendances of the South African teams when they are at home. They don't like the fact that they don't seem to be successful in this competition just yet. I've been having a look at the performances, the attendances and whatnot of the South African teams in the now 4 seasons they have been part of this competition. Let's have a look at the attendances. Do the South African fans care? Is it a big deal they're not making it past quarterfinals? What do you think about the travel? You guys can let us know your thoughts on the inclusion of the South African teams. If you're a South African fan, let us know where you put your priorities. Is it on the URC domestic comp or is it on the European Cup competition? I'm mostly focusing on Champions Cup here rather than Challenge Cup, just FYI. Never made it past a quarterfinal. Is this a big issue? Well, South African teams in the URC, since they're joining, have made the final every year. So they are competitive in the URC. They've won it once with the Stormers. The Bulls have been runners-up multiple times. The Stormers have run up. But they've never made it past the quarterfinal in the Champions Cup in the 4 seasons that they have tried. The Bulls and the Stormers just went out in the round of 16. Is this a big deal? I'm going to go with not really yet, because if you look at the URC as a wider competition, nobody apart from Leinster is making it into Champions Cup semi-finals. Leinster have done it every single year that the South African teams have been eligible to join the Champions Cup, but they have not seen any other URC teams alongside them. Glasgow have won the URC, Munster have won the URC, but neither has been to a Champions Cup semi-final at that time. So this issue of not making it past a quarterfinal is by no means unique to South African sides. It's everybody in the URC except for Leinster. You feel like the squad depth is traditionally one of the biggest talking points. Leinster has among the best squad depth of all teams in the world at club rugby. They genuinely can rotate out a pretty strong team to still compete in URC games, knowing that they have a big Champions Cup game the next week. Some other teams don't have that luxury. I feel like the coaches of the South African URC squads are still finding a bit of a balancing act between which players to play in which competition. In this most recent edition, the 2025-2026 edition, despite the fact that the Bulls and the Stormers have just gone out in the round of 16, both coaches put out strong lineups for those games, so they were by no means just giving up on the competition early. We have seen that, I feel like, in the past. I mean, you've seen it not just from South African teams, to be fair. There are coaches who've got other priorities. Sometimes they're focusing domestically. But you can't say that this year about the South African sides. The URC generally, you feel like, needs to up its game in terms of getting to Champions Cup semi-finals. But it's been a tough one because Leinster's made all 3, and they're still in line to make it this year. Toulouse has made all 3 since the South African teams have joined. Northampton's been in twice, and then you've had La Rochelle, Exeter, Harlequins, and Bordeaux. It's been a pretty exclusive club making up the semi-finalists in the Champions Cup. It's just a tough place to get into. So as I said, by no means uniquely isolated down to South African teams. Now, what about the attendances? Are the attendances low for the South African sides? Do they not care about the competition? Well, I would put it this way. There's kind of 3 levels of priority for South African fans. Number 1 is South African on South African teams. These derby matches blow everything else out of the water. They love their derbies, which is, again, by no means unique to South Africa. New Zealand against New Zealand matches do better here in Super Rugby than when the Aussies come to town. Back when it was the old Super Rugby, still, New Zealand against New Zealand is going to get a better crowd than when the Bulls came to town. And vice versa. It's just people like seeing teams take on their rivals. That's part of what sports is about. It feels ever so sweeter when you can beat your local rivals, go to work the next day and give your workmate who supports the Crusaders some grief because you beat them. Probably not if you're a Blues fan because you lose to the Crusaders most of the time. But you know what I mean. Derby matches do a lot better. I just feel like the South Africans, they take that to another degree because, like, it's not just a little bit more for South African derbies. It can be double, triple, quadruple, or more. like the average attendance. Like they might get 50,000 for a Bulls against Stormers game and then 8,000 for a non-South African team coming in the next week. The difference is stupendous. But second priority, if you're just looking at pure average attendance numbers, and to be fair, the Champions Cup, you get a really limited sample size, but the Champions Cup matches attend better than South African teams facing URC teams who are not South African. The average attendance for Champions Cup matches is higher than URC matches when the opponent is not South African. So it's South Africa against South Africa 1, Champions Cup 2, which is again not going to be a South African opponent thus far, and then 3 is your South Africa against non-South African URC team. That seems to be the priority across the first 4 years. So the fans do get out to attend Champions Cup matches, just not as much as South Africa against South African rivalries. And then the travel, the season factor, summer, winter, they were in reverse, Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere. The travel is a big deal. That is one you can't change. If you want the South African teams in the competition, you are going to have extra long travel legs. The rough ones are the occasions where teams have a round of 16 match either in South Africa and then Europe the next week or vice versa. That kind of thing you feel like is pretty rough, but at least you don't have the time zones to deal with that we used to have in Super Rugby. So that one is the one that you can genuinely have a gripe about, I feel, because it's just a long way. I feel it here in New Zealand. It's a long way to everywhere. So South Africa to Europe is a long flight. You're going to rack up the air miles. It's going to be tiring for players. Not everyone's going to want to do it, but I know New Zealand players still speak fondly, the ones who played in the old Super Rugby, about getting to go to South Africa and the experience that was. So I do feel like you're probably getting better rugby players from going on tour and that kind of thing. But I guess when it's 1 week in Europe, 1 week in South Africa, the next week back in Europe, that's a lot of travel. Now, personally, from my point of view, I do think it took a bit of getting used to, but I think we're getting there. I think we're getting there now. The squads, the coaches are finding ways to manage the load. And I feel like it's not going to be that long until we see a team like maybe the Stormers or somebody go on a run in this competition and potentially get themselves into that exclusive semi-final club. But you guys let us know what your thoughts are. How do you think the South African teams have gone in the Champions Cup after their first 4 years in the competition? Has it been a good addition? Did you prefer it the old way? Either way, most years it's been a pretty exclusive set. For a while it was Sarries, it was Exeter, now it's the French clubs and Leinster, who are the ones, the kind of powerhouse clubs in the competition. That hasn't changed too much. But anyway, you guys let us know your thoughts. Take care, and I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.